I want to talk about the relationship between certification and standardization. We are talking today mainly about certification, but it's closely linked to standardization, which is our job as we are DIN, the German standardization body, and dealing with all kinds of standardization issues. I want to talk about the link between certification and standardization and briefly explaining what are standards, about the committee structure in the field of AM, so all the standardization bodies which are dealing with issues in this context. And at the end, I want to give you a short overview of already existing standards or upcoming standards in the field of certification and quality. I won't go into detail in this issue. It's more a list and a service for you. So when you receive this presentation afterwards, you can look up all the different standards which are listed there. And if you have any questions about them, you are welcome to contact us. But let's start with the link between certification and standardization. Basically, certification is defined as the attestation by a neutral party that, for example, a product meets specific requirements, and the result of this certification process is a certificate. But the certification process itself is only a part of a bigger process, which is the conformity assessment, which is basically the demonstration, not only the attestation by a third party, but the real demonstration that a product, for example, fulfills specific requirements. So it also includes aspects as testing or inspection. But these processes always rely on some fundamentals, and these are often described in standards, which are the result of the standardization process. Standardization is a systematic process to harmonize subjects in a joint effort by multiple stakeholders in order to benefit the society as a whole. And it's being made in a full consensus proof process, which has a high acceptance. And the results are standards, and within these standards, the different requirements that are necessary for the conformity assessment and thereby also for the certification process are being defined. So these are kind of the base for the whole certification topic. Without the standardization process and without having documents where specific requirements are defined, it's often very difficult to have a certification process itself. So this is basically the link between standardization and certification, and it's quite important to understand it because these two issues are often kind of mixed up. A standard basically is a document that, as I told before, establishes a common ground and harmonizes different interests of multiple stakeholders. It lays down rules or guidelines and creates conformity and order by defining specific requirements. And in this regard, it's very important to know that standards are given by oneself. Because the standardization process is driven by the companies and by the industry. And in comparison to that, regulation comes from the outside, mostly being made by governments or authorities. So with the content or in the context of standardization, it's important to know that every company, every stakeholder of an industry can have a kind of influence also on the certification process by participating upfront in the standardization process. Coming to the committee structure, that's a little bit special in the context of additive manufacturing because in this area, the ISO and ASTM decided to cooperate, which is mostly unusual so far. And therefore, they made, which you can see here in the middle, this joint committees, which are led by a joint steering group. And ISO, which we are mostly operating with, consists of different working groups, and the experts who are participating in the development of standards in these working groups, they are sent to these joint working groups where they, together with the experts of ASTM, develop the final standards, which are then valid also in the ISO area, but also in the ASTM area. ISO, as you know, is mostly international, and ASTM is mostly active in America. So these are big institutions who are cooperating in this issue. And in the context of additive manufacturing and in Integradde, we found that especially the ISO Working Group 2, Processes, Systems and Materials, the Working Group 3, Test Methods and Quality Specifications, and the Working Group 4, Data and Design are very relevant for Integradde. And for today's issues, I think Working Group 3, Test Methods and Quality Specification, is one of the most urgent working groups you can find in the ISO committee structure. If you have any questions on the committee structure, or if you have any idea on standards that should be either developed or adjusted, you can always contact the secretary of the ISOTC, which is Yavuz Anik, or the chairman of the ISOTC, which is Christian Seidel, or you can contact us and we will forward your interest to the correct contact persons. Now I want to show you a couple of lists about existing standards, especially for in the field of certification and quality. So here I brought you a PDF file which was developed by ISO and lists several standards for qualification. The first three are mostly focusing on powder bed fusions and, for example, set different guidelines for installation, operation, and performance qualification, or system performance and reliability, process characteristics and performance. So mostly on the process itself and the characteristic and the performance of the process, so that you can that you have a document you can use to verify your process according to these standards. And the other ones, the fourth standard, which is about test artifacts and the geometric capability assessment of additive manufacturing system. And the last one is about qualification principles. They are all kind of focusing on this qualification issues in order to give you documents that you can use to verify your own processes according to these standards. A next list we made in Integradde research on existing standards, and we extracted these standards because these, in our opinion, are quite suitable to today's topic. Mostly, which you can see, they are focusing on general principles in the area of additive manufacturing, setting requirements, giving you guidelines or recommendations. I think I won't go into detail in this one, but you're very welcome to look at this list when you receive the presentation afterwards. This one is more interesting for you, I think, because on the left side, you find upcoming projects. So these are standards which are currently about to be developed. So in these standards, it's still possible that you can participate. So if one of these standards or of these projects is interesting for you, you're very welcome to contact us, and we will forward you to the responsible working groups where you can participate in developing these standards. So you can also influence the certification process later on by participating in these projects and setting the requirements in these areas. And on the right side, the ones in red, these are upcoming publications, so standards that are mainly finished and will be published within the next weeks or month. And just to give you a short impression, in case you have never seen a standard before, or you're not quite sure what exactly is mentioned within these documents, I will focus on this standard and give you in 1-2 slides a brief overview of what is included in this standard. So it's the ISO ASTM working draft 52926 about qualification principles, and in this example, I want to focus on part 1, the qualification of machine operators for metallic part production. There are in total 5 parts of this standard, which are all focusing on different production methods. But I will only focus on the first part so far. In the introduction and the scope, it says, or it tells you more about the background of the standard, because it says here that in additive manufacturing process, it must be proven that these processes meet the requirements, and therefore this standard should help to assure the before mentioned consistency and reproducibility of these processes. And the standard itself is therefore defining different requirements that should be fulfilled in order to later on have, for example, audits and then the certification process. And therefore, this the scope of the standard is that this ISO standard describes different activities and responsibilities of the operators on the field of the additive manufacturing technologies dealing with metallic part production, and therefore giving you, for example, guidance for the qualification of machine operators. And if we look on the content, the table of contents, you see that the mandatory chapter scope, normative references, terms and definitions, they are included in each and every standard. And the basic the content itself are described in the chapters afterwards. In this case, chapter 4 and chapter 5 about operation qualification, and chapter 5 on qualification test certificate. And for example, you can find different generic variables, or such as that the process should follow additive manufacturing procedure specification. You find reference to other standards or other parts, so that this standard itself could be very short, but all the information is given within the standard. You can, for example, find, if you go into machine model, that there should be it should be defined that the machine type and the software version are given. So different requirements are met in these chapters in order to give an easy way how you can structure the process itself afterwards. And if we have a look at the qualification test certificates, for example, it says that the test certificate itself should include the name of the company and the model, machine model, so that everyone is aware of what company is the certificate for, what machine are you working with, and it also defines several periods of validity, such as that this certificate that you have is only valid for 2 years, and so on and so forth. I only want to give you a short impression in this context, and I hope it's you forgive me that I won't go into detail. It's more to give you an understanding how the standard is structured and what you can find in there. But if you have any more questions, as I already mentioned, you can always contact us. You find our contact data on this slide, and we can also, I think, give you a sneak peek into the documents if they are not published yet. So if you have any questions, you're very welcome to contact us or the secretary of the ISOTC himself. So that's it from my side, and thank you very much.